It is 6 p.m. and I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'd also note that Councillor Duggan has sent in her regrets for this meeting, so we'll note that in the minutes. And with that, I will look for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Birtles. Are there any additions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. That takes us on to the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting on October 25th. If I can get a motion to approve those as circulated. Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. All right. We have one presentation tonight. It is with respect to the Nayatak food forest presentation. For a project that's occurring on Lunenburg Academy. We have the project organizers, Catherine Barrett, Greg Claus, and Teresa Quilty with us. And I will give the floor over to you if you'd like to come up to the podium. You have 10 minutes to make your presentation and we'll have 5 minutes of questions after that. If you can just turn the mic on there.
So,
yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you for giving us some time to talk about the Nayatak food forest at Blue Nose Academy, which is a collaboration between Blue Nose and the Lunenburg community to build a food forest on the school grounds in 2 locations. So we have part of our team here tonight. It's me, I'm Catherine Barrett, Teresa Quilty, and Greg Klaus over here, and Maria Abramenko, who is the principal of Blue Nose, sends her regrets, but I do have a message that I will read from her. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of what we'll talk about. What is a food forest? What's going on at Blue Nose Academy? What this project may present as an opportunity for Lunenburg as a whole, and how we hope that the town might help to see this project through. Next slide, please. This is kind of cutting to the chase here, but Teresa will talk more about this at the end, but I thought maybe you could keep these ideas in mind as I go through the presentation. We were hoping that we could suggest the town may help us with deliverables, things we actually need to build the forest, including soil and compost, things like that, with promoting the project through your communication channels, and organizing actual work parties out there, and thinking about how a project like this fits into the larger scope and plan of Lunenburg. But as I said, Teresa will talk more about that at the end. Next slide, please. So what is a food forest? Food forest is also called a forest garden, and it kind of blends all of those ideas. It is a garden built on the principles of a native forest. So instead of annual plants like tomatoes and carrots, it's built with perennials like trees and bushes and herbs, and mostly native to the region that the forest is growing in. Most of the plants produce food for humans and or wildlife. So again, instead of ornamental plants, roses or tulips, we grow berries and apples and herbs. Although I suppose tulips do feed deer around here. And third, it's planted not in rows, but in layers and in clusters of different types of plants, sometimes called guilds. So all the plants work together. You don't have rows of a single type of plant. You have a collection that works together as a little mini ecosystem. So the plants help each other. And because of that, it's easier to maintain. Well, as the next slide shows, thank you. All the plants function in these different layers and work together to help each other. These are the basic 7 layers of a food forest. You have the tallest one, the overstory, which are the biggest trees. So for example, pears or apple trees. The second layer is the understory, smaller trees like serviceberry or plum. Third, shrubs. So you could have berries mainly, raspberries, blueberries, that sort of thing. Fourth layer are herbs, all kinds of herbs that you might use in culinary purposes, but also flowers, wildflowers, things like that. The fifth is roots. And in this slide, it shows potatoes and carrots, I believe, but we would probably plant some perennial roots, something like Jerusalem artichoke or something like that. Six is mycorrhizal fungi or mushrooms in general, which in good soil will grow by themselves, but you can also plant mushrooms and grow them. And the seventh is vines, which can grow up trees or can be trellised. So all these, it looks very different from what you think of as a vegetable garden. It looks and functions more like a forest. And this diversity gives it resilience. It means it makes all of the plants and the soil more healthy. It means it's much less work to maintain, and it grows more food than you might get from an annual garden that requires a lot of input to keep it going. So it's a system that works. Next slide, please. And it has worked for a long time. It's not a new idea. Indigenous cultures and people living around the world have grown food this way for a long time. But it's kind of been newly discovered or rediscovered lately as we look at food insecurity, climate change, and becoming more locally resilient. Many communities around the world and in Canada are starting to plant food forests. In New Brunswick, there's quite a big project that involves 3 schools, and they have planted food forests in recent years, out on the West Coast in the US and in the EU and many other places. We believe that there are no other food forests on school grounds in Nova Scotia. So this would be the first. There are lots of school gardens, but none along this model. Next slide, please, which brings us to Blue Nose Academy and the project that we've begun. We've been talking with the school and working on this for the past year, a little over a year now. We don't have any plants in the ground now, but Teresa will bring you up to date on what we have done. But first, next slide, please. Why do this at a school? Why do this at all? There's lots of reasons. Learning, for one. I'm sure you can see that there are many options for collaborative learning and for links with the school curriculum. Food production, we're hoping that the food that's grown here will be served in the school, but also throughout the community. It's environment for the environment as well. Fewer inputs, more locally grown food, and community connection. We already have connected so many people in Lunenburg and beyond through this project, and we haven't even started planting it yet. I'll read Maria's letter. She would have wanted to be here, but she sent this letter for us to present. Dear esteemed council members, we at Blue Nose Academy are thrilled to have the food forest developed at the school. I have no doubt that this project will become a cornerstone of the school over years to come. I was just checking the time there, so I lost my place. Not only does the food forest have endless connections to science, health, math, and elementary curricula, but it will also be incorporated into the learning support program here at Blue Nose, allowing students who are at most risk of dysregulation, yet another source of sensory engagement and purposeful learning activity. Once the food forest is mature enough to provide us with food, it will allow us to cut down on the cost of food production here at the Blue Nose cafeteria, as well as packaging and greenhouse gas emissions. Learning to grow the food forest will provide our students with the understanding of and respect for the natural world, and will allow them to explore Mi'kmaq cultural knowledge and provide them with opportunities to build a sense of community, responsibility, as well as patience. The Food Forest Nursery, which Teresa will tell you more about, has already generated an abundance of curiosity from our students who cannot wait to see it built so they can start taking part in tending the forest, growing, and of course, harvesting the food. Overall, we are beyond excited to see this project follow through as we feel it is already quickly becoming a part of the Blue Nose identity. So I would have to say the school staff and teachers, administration, and the regional center have been very supportive of this project and very helpful since we first brought it to them a year ago. This slide just shows some of the many activities and connections that can be made with the school through the Food Forest. Everything from accessibility and inclusion, as Maria mentioned in her letter, providing an area of sensory input, but also for calming for some students. Native pollinator garden. There will be a Mi'kmaq medicine garden, which is a separate project, but will be included in the Food Forest. Compost making, plant propagation and seed saving, water, harvesting and cycling, and of course, food growing. And we're hoping seasonal workshops that involve not only the students, but community members as well.
Thank you, Catherine. That's the end of 10 minutes, but if no counselors have questions, we can yield the floor for 5 minutes for the question period for the presentation to continue. Everybody good with that? Okay. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, if you have questions, I could certainly talk about the next slide and the next slide and the next slide about project plan or anything else that you might have questions about. We were also going to mention, if we had a little more time, about how it connects with the comprehensive community plan and a little more about our ideas on how the town can benefit from and support this project. But love to hear anything you might have in terms of questions.
I think we're good. You can keep going.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there are two areas that we're planning to plant in. Many of you will be familiar with the area on the left, which is known familiarly as the bus loop, just a mound of grass right now with two lonely little linden trees in it, and then a corner of the playground in the back playground area. And the next slide, just outlining in general, just to give you the idea that we started this partnership with a project charter back in January of 2022. And since then, we've been working on lots of planning, organizing, designing, and so on, and gathering people together. But we'll do this in phases. So it'll generally be built around spring and fall planting opportunities, which are the best times to plan. And we'll have work parties and all sorts of things like that. So we'll be staging this activity over the next couple of years. Our budget is $40,000. Half of that is materials, which is like soil, compost, mulch, things like that. And so there's lots of opportunity for in-kind support for that. And half of it is plants, and we are hoping to get some of that in kind as well too. In addition to that, the work parties will be volunteer labor, and we think that we can get a lot of in-kind contributions for this. So the next slide is a lot of people have been asking us. Oops, I think we have. Oh yeah, yeah. We've been already getting lots of support. Catherine mentioned a couple of the places, but for example, the school board has supported us. They're installing classrooms the outdoor classrooms are already just been installed, and they're putting in some pathways as well. To get this going. We have won money from the Awesome Foundation. A Livelihood Branding and Design has done our beautiful logo and visual identity. We've already got lots of local donors and volunteers, and we also just received $1,000 from Leanne Children's Foundation. So the donations and support are really starting to roll in. And many people ask the next slide for ways to support. So there's lots of ways people can subscribe to our newsletters at our email address is a great way to find out what's going on, also on social media. and people can donate plants to our nursery, and that's already starting to fill up. It's on the school grounds. And then also people can give right now money through the school, either through a check or through the Donate Now button on the school website. And then the next slide, we just wanted to talk about the opportunity for Lunenburg. Next slide. It does align with our comprehensive community plan and the 5-year work plan that the town has for itself around environment, sustainability, urban design, culture, and recreation. We really see connections with these, with this project around greening the landscape and making the town more ecologically diverse and climate resilient, and so on. But we also see ways for residents of all ages to engage in this project in a way that's very positive. And already, we've got a lot. It's really the community, it's volunteers, people outside of the school that are really driving this project now. So we're getting such a great response from people, really loving it. We also see ways to save costs or add value to the town through existing waste and resources. So we mentioned things like soil and mulch and leaves and so on. Those things all cost money for the town to take and move, and we can make use of a lot of those things in a really positive way. And as Catherine mentioned, it's the first of its kind in Nova Scotia. The next slide, we also believe that we can inspire community level resilience here. And we're seeing through this, we're learning that there's a real appetite in this community and on the South Shore to get involved in and see things move more quickly around local food security, around urban reforestation and decolonization, rewilding areas, greening parks, no mowing initiatives, supporting more biodiversity, being more prepared for extreme weather, conserving water, and reducing waste. These are all things that we hear people being really eager for. And so on the next slide, what we'd like to really ask the town in that bolded item in the bottom, in particular to council, I guess our request is to ask, is there a way for us to have to open up a continued dialogue with the town and the community to talk about how we can address some of the low-hanging fruit that is available in Lunenburg to take a more comprehensive approach to climate readiness and resiliency and to really accelerate that. We think there's a lot of things that could just be done quite easily with community involvement. And so we'd like to have that conversation opened up. As we already mentioned, the first 2 items are ones that we already met with the town staff for. We were really grateful to have that meeting with town management. They were super helpful and engaged, and we'd like to be able to continue that conversation with them as well. So, so thanks for the extra time. And if there's any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Teresa. So councilors can ask questions after because that was the question period, but thank you for your presentation and for provide and steering a great initiative. I'm sure that you can stay in touch with management for any formal asks that would come forward in the future to a future council meeting. Thank you. All right, that takes us on to correspondence, petitions, and proclamations consideration. There are 2 pieces of correspondence. The first one is a suite of appointments to the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee. I see Ellen Johnson is noted there, but I don't know that she's with us or not. No. So these have been vetted through mayors and wardens and are advised for the councils to all ratify. If I can get a motion to ratify those committee appointments. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. The second is item 6.2 with respect to an NSCC partnership program in the land surrounding the water utility. We'll note that Councillor Sanford is declaring a conflict there for the minutes as an employee of NSCC in the Lunenburg campus. And is there any questions with respect to this item from council? Seeing none. I don't know if staff want to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak regarding this potential partnership. For the public record, my name is Jamie Doyle, I'm Chief Administrative Officer. As you can read, certainly in the report, this partnership, well, it isn't new. It's been around for quite some time. I just happened to pick it up as I sat in the seat. This partnership would align with our comprehensive community plan, specifically the environmental protection principle. In the report, it outlines the program through NSCC that teaches hands-on skills that would certainly benefit the town by monitoring and reporting on our Dares Lake properties, and has no financial obligation from the town at all. The report also outlines activities that may be carried out, such as mapping and GIS, wildlife habitat restoration, wetland identification. There's a whole host of activities that they're certainly going to monitor and learn from. I believe this to be a wonderful opportunity to partner with NSCC to benefit student education and hands-on experience, and certainly will provide some excellent data to the town. For these reasons, Mr. Mayor, I'd recommend support for the execution of a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, with NSCC as outlined in the motion. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my report.
All right. There's a draft motion provided. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any discussion, debate, comments, questions? Last opportunity. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. That takes us on to new business. The first item of new business is the appointment of a building official, fire inspector, and dangerous and unsightly premises administrator. There is a draft motion provided there with respect to our obligation under the MGA to appoint these officials for the town of Lunenburg. There is a staff report from the Director of Community Development. I don't know if there are any questions with respect to his report. Seeing none, is it anyone's pleasure to move the draft motion? It's presented, moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any comments, questions, discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Takes us on to item 9.2, which is a special event permit application from the Royal Canadian Legion for this year's Remembrance Day activities. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that as circulated? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Any comments or questions of staff?
Just wondering if this is something that we don't have to bring to council. It is Remembrance Day and it should just be an ongoing approval.
So I believe you want to speak to that, Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councillor Bertels. Not imminently, of course, as Mayor has mentioned a few times here. Some of these small nuance applications that are coming to council were really hindered by current policy that exists. Through our new municipal clerk, we are certainly compiling those processes and bylaws that don't allow us to be as nimble as we want to be, whether it's Remembrance Day or any other type of special event, so that it doesn't necessarily reach council's table for approval, but more so approved at a staff level with an information report from the CAO. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe that it's a street closure, and anything that's a street closure under our current regulations, I believe, has to come to us. All right. Any discussion, debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Takes us on to item 9.3, which is the capital and operating budget variance report to September 30th, 2022. And I will turn it over to the finance director to present her report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the budget variance report that's presented this evening is for the first half of the fiscal year. Councillors will note that we have changed the report slightly, as Public Works Department now provides you a regular capital status report. So the capital section focuses more on the spending versus the status of the projects. However, as per our previous reports, any projects with green check marks have indicated that the projects are completed. Operationally, at this point in the fiscal year, there hasn't been any particular budget risks of note, but we are heading into the winter and heating season, and the cost of fuel and snow removal are items that we will be monitoring closely. De-transfer tax collections have been higher than anticipated, and at September 30th, we're at 88% overall to budget. I will note there's a typo in the budget. It says 290 and it should be 390 for the overall budget. Notice that this evening. And the interim and final tax bills have been issued for the year, and 16% are outstanding as of September 30th, which is pretty typical for this time of the year. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any from council.
Councillor Halverson.
Thank you. Through the finance director, you mentioned about the fuel surcharges. We're seeing a lot of, obviously a lot of issues around that. How prepared are we for that? I guess particularly our snow clearing, like, do we had salt distribution, that's all done by town public works, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, all of our snow clearing is done by internal resources, not contracted.
Okay.
And as you'll note in the operations, there is projections to what we think we will be at the end of the year. I mean, obviously, weather is a huge variable. I did already take into account the increases of fuel that may be impacted, and still at this point, barring any unforeseen emergencies, I don't see any great risk, but things are quite volatile in that at this point.
And you're comfortable we have enough reserve, as somebody who drives a diesel and has just had to spend $2.50 a liter to fill my tank, up over, like $1 from last year. We're okay. We've got money in reserves. We're prepared to weather that storm if it goes, even higher.
If it does, I mean, we do have a specific reserves for salt, because that's been an item that we've been trying to build up the reserves for those. If it should come to that, we could use those for fuel, but I don't see that as an item that we would need to dip into.
Okay, so that's not an item that would have to come to council for approval. It's something you guys can just do in a matter of course in the bookkeeping.
If I was taking something from the reserves, that would come to
Reserves, yes.
council. So the next report will be at the end of December, and if there was any additional risk, we could discuss those at that point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halverson. Any further questions, council at the stage? Okay, seeing none, that takes us on to item 10, which is our in-camera meeting, and I need a draft motion. Moved and seconded that we meet in camera. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Birtles. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, and with council's unanimous consent, we'll take a 10-minute